So what am I doing? Um, well, this past weekend, I just got back from the Antarctic. I spent 2 weeks in the Antarctic uh,
Wow.
on a trip that was advertised as a voyage of a lifetime, and those are highfalutin words, and it turned out to be right. It was a voyage of a lifetime. I spent some time with a guy that I've known over the years very casually, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Got
Oh,
to know
wow.
him better. Wonderful, wonderful man. Fell in love with Neil deGrasse Tyson and had an extraordinary number of adventures in zodiacs and penguins and rough seas and history. I had spent a lot of time with Shackleton and his adventure. Do you know anything about Shackleton's thing?
I can't say I'm familiar with Shackleton.
Well, Ernest Shackleton was a British explorer around the turn of the 20th century,
Okay.
1904 or 5, and he uh, decided he would go and explore get to the South Pole, and
Okay.
he got a sailing ship, the Endurance, got caught in sea ice and ultimately was crushed. They spent 2 years. I'm giving you a brief history.
Yeah.
Spent 2 years on the ice. They hauled the lifeboats. There were three lifeboats on the sailing ship. They got them off the ship before the ship was crushed. They trucked them. They pulled them across the ice about 100 miles to where there was open sea. He then the three boats then rowed to an island about 500 miles away, Elephant Island, where it's a brief outcropping. It looks volcanic to me,
Hmm.
and they set 20 of the 28 men ashore
Hmm.
and left them two boats, and they took one boat with the other eight guys and rowed and sailed 800 miles to South Georgia, a whaling station in which they were on the west side of the island. They had to get to the east side. They couldn't row around it, so they went up over Alp-like mountains, slid down glacier on their backside, got to the whaling station, made three tries that were turned back to get back to Elephant Island. On the
Hmm.
fourth try, they got there. They rescued the 20 guys, made it back to the whaling station, and they got back to Ireland to England after 2 years, not having lost anybody. So
Wow.
he was a hero, Shackleton, and his adventure is one of the great adventures of the world of mankind.
Yeah.
I was fascinated by it, and I was
Yeah.
able to go along with that exploration, do all the research I could, and do Shackleton's passage. During that time of being there, I had also fallen in love with the adventurers. Scott, I've forgotten his first name, Englishman who got to the South Pole but didn't make it back,
Mm.
died on the way back,
Hmm.
and a Norwegian named Amundsen who went to the South Pole and did make it back.
Wow.
So the South Pole for me was filled with a history of mankind's incredibly dangerous journey of adventure, which
Yeah.
harkens back to or harkens to today's adventure, because on board the ship were two astronauts, Scott Kelly and Jose Hernandez, who had made the voyages to the moon
Yeah.
and were part of this incredible sense of dangerous exploration of which I was peripherally a part of.
That's incredible. And we know that you have an adventurous spirit. You have made trips into space, and you're a pioneer in television with over 70 years in the business. So, what gives you that driving spirit?
My mother took her breast away from me, and I resented it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just there. You know, I don't think, I'll just speak from my point of view. I,
Yeah.
I don't think of it as, oh, I'm off on an adventure. It's taking it from leaving the warmth embrace of Montreal and going to a rope mattress in Ottawa, capital of Canada, for 3 years in a repertory company. I mean, I had wonderful middle class comfort and a good education, and I dropped it all to go live a lonely, nerveless life filled with the possibility of being criticized. Uh, why? I don't know. It just was there.
Yeah.
But that was as big an adventure as any because of the risk of life and limb and failure.
Yeah. Well, the adventure still continues for you to this day.
And the adventure
Recently,
continues.
that's right. Recently, we have learned that you have returned to the role of Captain James T. Kirk
Mm.
in a short film. What was it like to
Oh, the
go
short
back
film.
into that role?
Well, it was an experiment. It wasn't really me playing Captain Kirk. It was an adventure in special effects.
Okay.
This is what can be done.
And this
And
was a short film, right? The 765
very,
seven
very,
four unification.
very, very short film of
Yeah, right.
what, how you can find emotion in motion, in emotion capture. I never thought of it that way. It's
Wow.
emotion capture.
And as I understand, you played your character throughout many different decades, and they did de-aging technology. What was your first impression uh, i- acting with that and seeing the results of that?
Felt young again until my sore leg hit me, until my arthritis kicked in.
Yeah.
Felt young again until my arthritis kicked in.
Well, was it an emotional experience at all?
um, I should say something about that. I'm sorry, it's early morning. um, it certainly is a shock. It's not the first time I've seen me looking 50 years younger.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and it certainly is a shock. It's as big a shock as there was a segment of Star Trek in which they made me look 50 years older. So I haven't quite thought of it that way, but I've seen it coming and going, and I'd rather be younger looking older than older looking younger.
That makes a lot of sense actually.
Good.
And one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, you spent a long time pretending to explore space, pretending to explore outer space, but you've gone out of outer space, and you're telling me that you recently went to Antarctica. What's the biggest difference between exploring the vastness in real life and portraying it on a screen?
What's the difference? It's called reality, because you're sitting on a stage, 32, in a chair that's barely um, barely escaping the nails that keeping the chair together are barely keeping the chair together, as against being in a spaceship that if the slightest thing goes wrong, you're dead. So it was quite different. God.
I know as a lot of these fans are going into the expo when you visit New Orleans,
Yeah,
a lot
I'm
of a
looking
lot
forward to
of
visiting.
a lot of them are going to be looking back your Star Trek career. So, in terms of Star Trek, when you guys were making it in the early stages, did you know it was going to be as iconic as it was?
Yeah, no, no, we didn't. Mac, it's okay. Um, any more than those uh, extraordinarily unlucky people who were in the path of that madman's vehicle. They
Hmm.
were out there for a good time and got slaughtered. And in the same way that you don't know what's going to happen when you step out of your house, you have no idea what's going to happen. And I felt that
Yeah.
same way uh, at times in the Antarctic and at times up in space. You
Hmm.
just don't know which way the pendulum is going to swing.
Right. Well, Mr. Shatner, I'd like to thank you for taking some time to talk to a little guy like me today.
Oh,
And we look forward to you coming to town.
I'm looking
Especially,
forward to coming
have you been to New Orleans much?
many times.
Many times. What are some of your impressions of the city that have made I
I
guess
was
like a
I was
lasting
I was
impression?
king of the Mardi Gras one year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What are some of your favorite aspects of New Orleans? Is it the food and the music? What brings you back?
all of that. The
All of it.
food and the music. The city's a beautiful city. The city has suffered a lot. There's a lot of pain and anguish, a lot of living in New Orleans with floods and storms and murder and yet it survives. And yet
Yeah.
it is part of the history of the United States. Um, I'm a Montrealer. I'm from Canada, from French Canada, and many of the forebears in Quebec took the long trip down the Mississippi and became uh, Acadia. Is it? There's no R, right? Acadia.
We call in layman's terms we say Cajuns.
Well, became Cajuns, exactly.
Yeah.
So the French Canadians that I have been a part of all my life settled in New Orleans hundreds of years ago, and I'm peripherally a Cajun. Je parle français comme New Orleans, homme. Est-ce que
Oui,
vous
merci.
parlez français, t'aimes bien?
A little bit.
Yeah.
We we merci beaucoup. We're
No, no,
happy to
that
have you in
doesn't
our
work.
city.
Merci beaucoup is not Cajun.
Well, I'd like to wish
Anyway,
you
I'm playing with you, and so my ties to New Orleans are many.
yeah,
I've been there a lot, and I think it's a great city, and I am so I feel. I mean, the words can't express how badly I feel over the tragedy that's been taking place with storms and floods and
absolutely. The
and
last few days have been
awful.
they've been tough.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we are happy to have you as our guest
Well,
coming,
perhaps I
and
can bring a dollop of joy to
we'll be happy to have it and
that.
happy to have you. And
That's my hope.
like to wish you a joyeux de Mardi
Thank
Gras
you.
and laissez le bon temps rouler.
Oui, yeah, exactly.
All
Take
right.
care. Bye bye.
Merci, Mr. Shatner.
Merci.